Welcome back everyone to Genshin Interact. I'm Vixen, and today I'm joined by Rift.
Today we will be talking about the upcoming first half of the 3.5 banners and its characters on the banners. If you do enjoy the video, please go ahead and like and subscribe and check out the rest of the channel for other videos you may be interested in.
Now, onto the video. First, we see Dehya is going to be part of this next banner, and it's actually kind of exciting because I know a lot of people have been wanting this Sumeru character for the longest time possible. I know I have. Looking more into Dehya, what her team function is going to be, we see her as the damage dealer of the team, the person who's going to be popping out a lot of damage, and it makes sense with her mercenary style character. Talking about her skill, her burst, what her function is going to be on the team, and Rift, what do you think she could really do in the team to help herself and other characters?
Dehya can use her skill and then go off field, and that field will stay there, and characters in that field will have a resistance to their interruption increased, and when they take damage inside the field, a part of that damage will be diverted to Dehya, who's actually still off field. And so, Vixen, how do you think that'll actually be helpful to Dehya and the team as a whole?
Well, there's a few things actually, and later on we'll talk about her weapon and some stuff that kind of helps her out with that. But when she takes more damage, she's going to be ascending into HP percent, which is going to make her a lot more tanky and able to take a lot more of the hits. Doing this is going to allow her to be more of a tank role as much as she is a DPS. So her team function kind of goes so many different directions that her skill and her burst fit the role of her being a mercenary and even sometimes as a bodyguard, as we've seen in the storyline, so particularly well. Besides team function, let's look a little bit deeper into what her playstyle is going to be. When you have Dehya off field, you're going to be having another DPS on field if you want to do a quick swap team, or throw another character on field, and if they take damage, a part of that damage is going to be diverted into Dehya taking that damage. But besides her skill, what are some things we can look at in her burst, Rift?
Well, we see Dehya's burst providing a major on-field damage potential, but it is short range since her fist will actually become her weapon here, not the claymore. Well, with Dehya in her burst, we see a very mono, pyro, or reaction heavy capability, especially since we know she's going to be somewhat of a quick swap character with that on-field burst and that off-field skill. Being off-field and on-field with double scaling with that HP percent might allow for big numbers without reactions, but also with reactions, so I see her as kind of a flexible character, to be honest. Moving out of playstyle, what type of weapon will Dehya be using?
Well, she's going to be hitting up that claymore, which we're so glad to see, as we saw her already playing a little bit in the story, but as she will be a little bit slower with her greatsword, going back to her burst, she's going to be getting a little bit of a speed up. It's very similar to how Cyno plays with the timing game. She's also going to be focusing on her skill, which is going to be turning into a different type of move, which if you hit it after each normal attack will then speed your burst hits up more frequently.
Looking at 5-star weapons and even 4-star weapons, is Dehya's 5-star weapon really worth it?
Her 5-star weapon, Beacon of the Red Sea, is going to be her best in slot weapon. It's going to be coming with a little bit of a crit rate main stat, and a pretty heavy one at that, and it's going to bring an attack percent increase when her skill hits opponents, and another attack increase when she takes damage. All of these things is going to help her off-field gain that attack percent, which might fit her into that quick swap role like we talked about earlier, so that she can constantly feed her damage and attack so that when she comes back on field and pops into her burst, she'll be able to do even more damage. Besides her 5-star weapon, I've looked around here and there and I've seen that 1 or 2 4-stars really look capable and useful for her, and we won't be able to know until we actually get her and see and try a lot more of her out. The best free-to-play weapon is probably Luxurious Sea Lord. This sword is going to be an elemental burst damage increase weapon. It's going to be helping her a lot with obviously her burst. But in the other side of the free-to-play aspect is the Battle Pass option that we always talk about, and that's Serpent Spine. Serpent Spine has a little bit less crit rate than her signature 5-star weapon, and it has a really good ability, very similar to her 5-star weapon's ability. With both of these weapons, if you take more damage, then you're going to be doing more damage later on. After we've seen Dehya and we focused on the Pyro DPS, the other side of the banner is going to be Cyno. Rift, what are some things that immediately come to you with thinking about Cyno?
Well, with Cyno, it's just another DPS. The only difference I really see between Cyno and Dehya is their elements. Because of their playstyle being so similar, it's really a question of, do you want the Pyro version or do you want the Electro version? But Cyno, we see, ascends into crit damage. Again, his playstyle is a little bit different from Dehya, although it's so similar. The only slight difference is that Cyno is heavily on field and doesn't really have a quick swap or off-field kind of capability for the team composition. His burst will overpower the field with Electro, and he becomes immune to the Electro Charge, very similar to Raiden actually, with an increase to Elemental Mastery, which he scales on.
But going on to weapons, what are some weapons that obviously are going to stand out to be Cyno's best in slot, or even some other weapons that some people could use?
Well, Cyno's best in slot weapon is, of course, his signature weapon, Staff of Scarlet Sands. It will give him that crit rate main stat, which is always helpful for a DPS character. One specific thing that's really good about it, specifically for Cyno, is that it turns Elemental Mastery into attack, and it causes skill hits to increase his first ability even more. So while that is his best option, we also see Primordial Jadewing Spear, if you've managed to get one of those before. This will work really well on Cyno. Again, it has a crit rate main stat, and it gives a bunch of attack when you just hit opponents. We also see Calamity Queller with a high base attack and giving an elemental damage bonus, and skill increases attack with stacks, which the way you play Cyno is when you're in his burst, you want to do those skill hits when you see that little eye on screen, and it gets a lot of damage increase when you do that. And so Calamity Queller will also be taking effect when you do that as well. But besides the 5-star options, what other 4-star weapons or free-to-play weapons do you think would work on Cyno, Vixen?
Some of the 4-star weapons are going to be Katane Cross Spear and Deathmatch. First, looking at Katane Cross Spear, it's an Elemental Mastery main stat, which is another thing that just goes heavily into Cyno's consistent use of elemental reactions, plus his on-field ability. Never mind its ability of skill damage increase, and it gives energy back for his burst. It's a better weapon for reaction Cyno, and it's specifically amazing for his aggravate reactions. Besides a Katane Cross Spear free-to-play option, the Battle Pass weapon is a pretty good weapon to use on him. It has a crit rate main stat, much like his 5-star signature weapon, and it gives it a major attack bonus based on the amount of opponents that are nearby. This weapon will outplay Katane Cross Spear unless you are trying to go heavy into elemental reactions though. Now that we've seen a little bit more about their kits and a little bit more about the characters themselves, what are some pulling options that people need to know?
Well, there's always a few questions you should be asking yourself when you are wanting to pull for a character. And the first question is, in this case, because Dehya and Cyno are both DPS characters, you need to first ask yourself, do you need a DPS character on your account? And if not, because you already have a few and you really like those, then you should really just stop here and maybe save your Primogems because you've already got those roles filled. But if you do need a DPS character, then we have some other questions for you that you might want to ask yourself. And the second question would be, what element is your account in need of? Do you not have a lot of Pyro characters? Maybe you don't have a Pyro DPS. Maybe you didn't have D-Luke if you've never gotten D-Luke from a loss of a 50-50. Maybe you don't have Yanfei. And then also for Electro with Cyno, if you don't have Raiden or you didn't ever get catching.
Something else that people should focus on thinking about whether or not you should pull for one of these characters is, do you have the resources to properly invest into the character that you are looking to pull? Looking into Dehya and Cyno obviously being 5 stars, characters are not easily buildable all the way up to 80 or 90. Next on screen, you'll see that we've thrown up some of the material for Dehya and Cyno that they're going to be needing. That's going to be including boss materials, weekly boss materials, as well as Mora, and also finding those specific flowers and little boss monsters as well for the different materials that both characters are going to be desperately needing to get them to level 90. Another question we need to think about is, what kind of teams are you trying to build? If we're going to be looking at Dehya and you're thinking, I really want Dehya, you've been waiting for her for a long time, Dehya is going to be focusing on Vaporize, much like other Pyro DPS characters, but we did talk about a mono Pyro role that she could possibly fill, as well as a possible burning team that could be in the making that we could see whenever she eventually comes out. Rift, what do you think Cyno could fill into some certain spots into some other teams?
Cyno will heavily benefit from an Electro support for energy, but also can make use of Dendro supports for amazing aggravate numbers, and especially because he's scaling on EM, if you're building an aggravate team with Cyno, that's one of his best team builds. So looking at your account, what roles do you have filled or not filled as far as DPS characters, and even all the way to like healers? If you don't have a lot of healers or supports in general, you probably want to save Primogems and save for more supportive characters. But weighing the dangers from completely free-to-play and new players, but also veteran free-to-play players and whales, what are some points of views that can be seen there, Vixen?
3 things we always want to tell people in our to pull or not to pull videos is that free-to-play players should always invest in multifunctional characters who can be used in all different kinds of teams so that they can have a well-rounded account. Veteran free-to-play players, or even just veteran players in general, even on low income, you might want to focus specifically on finding niche characters to make those one-of-a-type team builds that can really push your team to the max, whether it's in the Abyss, and have some extra fun with the account that you have as well. You've already got some decent lineups, now just look to have even more fun in the game. Whales, you honestly have all the primos and the money in the world, so just go with whatever you want. But still, if you want to think about specifically constellations, look into what constellations will benefit the certain characters the most. As a general rule, most good constellations, other than the C6, will be C1, C2, and possibly the C4. The C3 and the C5 can be good, but it does matter whether or not the character is going to be focusing on their skill or their burst.
We hope that this video could help you decide on whether these characters coming up on the next banner are for you.
As always, if you have any questions that might help other players, go ahead and let us know in the comments. Thank you again for watching the video, and we'll see you in the next one.